Compañeros, welcome to the SQL Data Partners podcast, the podcast dedicated to SQL Server-related topics, which is designed to help you become familiar with what's out there, how you might use those features, or ideas on how you might apply them in your environments. I am Carlos L. Chacon.
And I am Steve Stedman. We are two data professionals trying to help others get a better handle on their database environments, either through this podcast, our training, or our consulting practice. Thanks for joining us on the SQL Trail. Welcome to the show.
SQL Data Partners.
Compañeros, welcome to another episode. This is episode 121, and it's good to have you on the SQL Trail again, manager.
Topic is on what makes a good manager. That's an interesting one.
That's right. So this was when I go to the SQL Saturdays, and I like to try and get people's thoughts about different things. And I was in Charlotte, I guess, it's been a month or two now. And I thought, hey, let's talk to people about what makes a good manager. And then this topic evolved a little bit for me, and we'll get into that as we begin our discussion.
All right. But before we do that, do we have any compañero shout-outs this week?
Yeah, so we're going to mention a few people, obviously the folks that we talked to, and we're appreciative to those who have lent their voices for this episode. It is interesting, however, I have been thinking about it, but it was vocalized actually by another blogger, and they were specifically talking about Twitter, but it just seems like social media in general, the idea of the like button and how engagement tends to be a little bit lower, but likes continue. Engagement tends to be a little bit lower, but likes continue to go way up.
Right.
And so, how do you kind of judge that, when you put out content and things? And so obviously, compañeros, we're very interested in hearing from you, and, your thoughts are not stupid. And so obviously we're appreciative to those who are willing to engage with us and, drop us a line, whatever that might be.
Oh, yep. Definitely. We always like to hear from people.
That's right. So a reminder, we're still collecting tips and tricks. We want to try to start this new segment in January. And we invite you to leave those comments, either via social media or on the website, on the podcast page. You can leave that and we'll put them into the mix, and we'll start that up in January of next year.
Yep. So that's what we're looking for there, is really just what are your ideas on things that you know that other people don't always know when you're getting around in SQL Server or Management Studio.
Sure. Just let us know.
Yeah. People ask you this, like if you're sitting next to someone at a keyboard and you're helping them work through something and they're doing something the hard way, and you try and explain how to do it an easier way. And sometimes it's not that easy to explain. And we're going to try and take some of those on.
That's right. Exactly. And I even think, and so it was interesting. We were actually talking about a function today, right? So functions might sometimes play into this as well. So if you have a favorite function that, people ask you about, they're like, hey, why are you using that? You'd love to know that too.
Yeah. I have a funny story on that. There's the stuff function in SQL Server. And I was explaining it to somebody years ago. And she said to me, well, stuff, what's the real function you're using? Like, she thought I was just using the word stuff as a placeholder for a real function name. And came back to point out that, well, there is indeed a SQL Server function called stuff.
It's called stuff, yes.
Yep.
There you go. Perfect example.
Yep. Yep. So we also have an upcoming Database Health Monitor webcast on the 14th of December.
That's right. So for those of you who are catching this early, there's still time to register. Obviously, if you're listening to this after the 14th, you can watch the video recording when it comes out.
Yep. And that'll be at 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern on the 14th. And we'll be going through and talking about the quick scan report, Database Health Monitor, and things you can do there. And you can find the link at sqldatapartners.com/webcast. And you can go there and sign up now.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to putting on more of those and hopefully doing those the second Thursday of every month. For our show notes today, you can reach us at sqldatapartners.com/manager
or at sqldatapartners.com/121 for the episode number.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we started by getting some people, kind of man on the street, right? Took my recording equipment and went to Charlotte down there in October And so collecting some thoughts. So let's go ahead and take a listen to those, and then we can go from there.
Okay, my name is Geeta, and I work for a financial institution. And as the question which you're asking, the best attribute, I think the manager can understand your strength, and he gives you the opportunity which can explore you and make you shine where your strengths are. Also, he develops like a very good trust relationship where it's not like a micromanagement. He gives you more responsibility to do it effectively by yourself without managing if the things are happening. And if you're working without your manager managing you, like a micromanage you, and still you're working, I mean, that's the best manager.
Okay. So hello, my name is Doug Purnell. I work for Elon University. And the best trait in a manager is someone who can give you enough string to do your job, do some research, but then pull you back in when there's a high priority item or a task that needs to get completed. I have that now, and it's great. Gives me some freedom, but also, I know when there's an email sent or, the passing hallway conversation, like, oh, okay, that deserves my attention, rally back, get it done, and then continue on. So, yeah.
Hello, my name is Sandra Peel. I'm a software developer at CMI Solutions. And I think the best qualities in a boss are integrity and being ethical in everything they do with employees, customers, and any business dealings.
This is Rick Higas. I think one of the best attributes they can have is and although they may not be able to do anything about it, at least they can, let you know that you're being heard and that they're showing that you have that you're important to them.
Hi, I'm Matt Gordon. I'm a data platform solution architect for DMI. So the best attributes of a good manager is trusting their good people to do the things that they hired them to do.
So what does that trust look like to you?
Lack of micromanagement. If you assign a task, you hire them to do it, let them do it within parameters, but let them do it. That's what you're there for. That's what they're there for.
So I'm going to extend this question just a little bit because we've had this idea of micromanagement come up a bit. What then maybe is a responsibility of an employee to help the manager not micromanage? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you have to earn that trust. I mean,
employee to help the manager not micromanage. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you have to earn that trust. I mean, if you're new to a company, generally they'll let the leash out in sections, and you need to accomplish the task as you go. Even if you're walking off the street with all the certifications, credentials, experience, you're still getting used to a new firm, new manager, new structures. So you have to earn that trust as you move forward. And if you don't, then they're not going to let the leash out the next section.
Hi, I'm Tafoya Page. The best qualities of a manager, I would say, is somebody who listens and somebody who is attentive to his direct reports. A good manager, I would say, is somebody who you can sit and have a conversation with. Somebody who's also a risk taker or whatever it is, people report to him. And somebody who's understanding, because sometimes you go through stuff in life. It's a lot of different events happen in life, family or whatever the case may be. Somebody who's understanding towards that. And, work is work. Definitely you here to work. And you have a manager who's really understanding of the outside portion, besides work.
Awesome. Jeff Garbus, CEO, Soaring Eagle Database Consulting.
Royce Cavett, Executive Director of Sales, Soaring Eagle Database Consulting.
I'll offer two. The first is that a good manager empowers his employees or her employees to be able to do the tasks and perform the tasks he needs them to perform. So that means not only do you give a task, but you give the person the ability to complete the task without having to jump through additional hoops. With that person's creativity, without putting limits on his or her ability to perform that.
I'll add a good manager sets clear expectations, understands how to hold things accountable, and doesn't micromanage. Allows them to do their job and encourages them to make the right decisions.
Joseph Miller, Soaring Eagle, account executive. A good manager is transparent. A good manager is somebody that cares not only about the task, but making the person that's under them successful, as well as a good manager is candid. Somebody that's candid with the person that they're supervising or working with.
My name is Justin. I work for Idera. And when I think about managers, I've had good managers and I've had bad managers. The qualities I've liked the most about good managers is that they empower you. They listen to what you have to say about the things that are your challenges to do your job correctly, and they empower you. They listen and they empower.
I'm Vera DeWitt. I think there are a lot of qualities, but I think the main one would have to be understanding, because you need to understand what your people are going through. You have to be able to relate to them. So understand and be relatable to understand what they're dealing with. Insight, drive, trustworthy, a leader. Got to be able to lead your people there and relate to them.
So I also opened this up to Twitter not too long ago, and we had a few people chime in. Right, so Mike Armentrout, a former guest, he was with us on the Click episode. So Mike says, Click episode. So Mike says, the fortitude to run interference, so prioritize work and be focused on without constant firefighting.
And he used hashtag enforce priorities on that. So that's a really good point there. And I mean, I've seen managers who they claim they have a priority list for you to work on, but your number one priority changes 6 times a day.
Sure.
And sure, there's some days where that's just the way it's going to be. But if that's your everyday occurrence, then somebody's doing something wrong, probably. And I think that to be able to run interference and keep people focused so they can actually get something done, rather than just the amount of thrash that you spend shifting gears between projects.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, and again, we're gonna come at this from a manager's perspective here in a little bit, but I can see how this can sometimes be tough, because we've talked a little bit about this, because some people can make it difficult, right, from a priorities perspective.
Right. But I think that in dealing with that, you always need to consider the amount of thrash that's involved when you're switching from one project to another. And
no, that's right.
You want to make sure that whatever you're working on, if you have a new number one priority, you don't lose what you're doing. You save it off so you can come back to it later.
Right. And the ability to communicate that, right?
Yep.
I mean, because, it's the, hey, you get an email, you see the email notification pop up, and then they show up in your cube. Hey, did you get my email?
Yeah.
Yes. Notification just popped up. Like, I haven't read it, consumed it, and have a response for you. But,
Yeah, that's interesting. And it sort of comes down to, as well, how often do you read email? And I know one of the things that I do when I'm heads down actively working on something that I need to get done, well, everything needs to get done, obviously, but that I need to get done quickly. Sometimes I'll ignore my email for an hour or two. Well,
sure.
And people, they'll then text or call and say, well, did you get my email yet? And, well, no, I'm working. I'll get to that in a minute. And I think the expectation that email is an immediate response mechanism is not always a valid assumption.
No, exactly. Yeah, you're right. So culture kind of plays a role in there, right? So I think, are you helping culture when it comes to helping with priorities?
Yep.
So Jen and Sean McCown from Minionware, they chimed in as well. And they talked about, again, that ability to listen and to hear. And it seemed like that was a fairly common response when I was talking with people. So common answers, so they didn't want to be micromanaged. They wanted their manager to listen and to help me succeed. And so I thought it was interesting that we tend to think of maturity as people that are put there in a position to help us.
Right.
right? So we kind of have I'll say a bit of a narcissistic view, almost in a sense. I mean, maybe not quite, but that idea is, well, what I think you should be doing is helping me.
Right.
And it's easy to think that way because obviously you report to them, you have responsibility to them, and things like that. They have a responsibility over you, right? There's things that they can do for you that you may not be able to do for yourself.
Yep.
In terms of working with other departments and things.
But then also, if you look at the perspective of your manager's boss's view of your manager is that that manager is there to help them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we actually then took that another level. And so I started asking some other managers. I said, okay, managers, what do you think your role is? And so then I went, role is. And so we have one voice, and then we'll get into some of the other emails that I gathered.
This is Carla Shields, the Executive Director of Computer Technology Institute of Central Piedmont. What makes a good manager is involving your team, engaging them, and being their biggest advocate so that they can succeed in this world of technology.
So then I went ahead and reached out to a couple of my previous managers, actually, and just asked them, right? I said, what do you think it is to be a good manager? And one of them said that management is about watching the right things and supporting at the right time, which I thought was kind of interesting. And that idea made me think a little bit about almost like an alert or like a dashboard.
Right.
Right. You kind of want to get a pulse or a beat on what's going on and then respond accordingly. And I know you kind of want to get a pulse or a beat on what's going on and then respond accordingly. And then, to kind of take that scenario even further is, are you a good alert, or are you the kind of alert that eventually is going to get ignored because you're popping up all the time? Right.
Right. Are you giving your manager the right information so that they can support you at the right time?
Exactly. Yep. And I know a lot of times, and it's very difficult, and there's a balance here, right? Because I know for a lot of folks, and we've talked about this type of subject before, a lot of folks are only kind of feel like they're having that discussion at the annual review, and that's just not enough, right? That's like, I'm not watching the dashboard, right? Like, yep. And, but then if you're constantly popping in or sending emails every day, like, hey, what's my status? Hey, what's my status? That's probably not there. So, they're trying to, I guess, how much information do you give so that they can feel like they know what's going on without also then giving them to say, hey, by the way, like, micromanage me, right? I need more hands-on than maybe you're giving me.
Right. And I think that's something that where if a manager's having a regular meeting with each team member individually, like more often than their annual review, and whether that's once every other week or once a month or once every 6 weeks, who knows? I've seen it in any combination of those. Yep. It's a good way to be able to talk about, for the manager to be able to talk and say, well, what do you need? Or what can I do to help you?
Right.
But it's also from the employee's perspective, it's a great time to be able to push to the manager and say, what can I do to better support you? And
yeah, exactly. There's that two-way streak. Right?
Yep. And yeah. I used to be a big, when I was doing a lot of management, I was a big surprises. Everything on there should be things that have been talked about throughout the year. Right. However, that's not always the case. There's a lot of surprises when it comes to annual reviews.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so another one of my managers, he said, okay, so a few things that he's learned, right? Empathy and compassion go a long way, number one, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then the second one, accountability. Holding people accountable helps keep everyone honest, including yourself.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think, and those two things almost are a little bit combative in a sense, right? Empathy and accountability can sometimes, I'm not saying they're opposites, but they can seem like opposites when you're on one spectrum or the other, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. And I think that there's the right place versus less for both of those, with the empathy and compassion, certain things that are appropriate as a manager and certain things that are probably very inappropriate as well.
Sure.
And I mean, I can think that, I don't know, there's a difference between like something tragic has happened in your life and you've come in late today because of that, or you're in a car accident and that's something tragic and you're in late, versus like someone who is continuously late for meetings.
Yeah, perpetually. Right?
Yeah, or habitually, I guess. And looking at that, I mean, I think that's one of those that I've seen, and I've probably done it myself, a good job and a bad job, probably on both sides of those.
Yeah, it's not hard, right?
Yeah,
and they're learning too, right? I guess that is one of the interesting things. I mean, just like not all of us. I mean, myself included. I'm definitely in this camp. I didn't become a DBA. I had deserved it, right? It kind of fell to me a little bit in a sense, and managers are sometimes the same way, right? There's a need, and then they get caught up in it.
Yep. And on that, I think there's a lot of people who end up as managers because that's sort of the career path that's set, and that like you're a stellar technical person. And
you've been around for a while.
And a manager leaves or the team grows. You need another manager, and they say, "Oh, grab him or her. They've been here the longest."
Exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes you're taking your absolute best technical person and putting them into a role that they may not want to do, but then oftentimes they associate a pay raise with that. So suddenly they want to do it, even though it may not be something that they really want to do.
Right. Or are really great at, right? Because it's a different set of skills. I mean, the things we've been talking about, Jim McClellan has been talking about soft skills, building culture, all of these types of things, have nothing to do with, keeping databases up or maintained or things like that.
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So Jim McClellan, who was a former guest, and we did our CIO panel episode 54, he came and he said, so a good manager is someone that can lead and direct a team to success. And then he gave a couple of follow-up or ideas around how that could happen. So in order to do that, they need to clearly understand the goal to be achieved, and they need to understand how to motivate and communicate with their team and with the stakeholders. I'm like, okay, so communication, big deal. And he goes on to say, I think a critical management skill is communication. When a project fails or a team gets demotivated, it is usually due to lack of communication. Now, this was interesting because nobody really brought this up. I guess they all talked about listening, and I guess listening is part of communicating, right? But I think kind of the outbound stuff can also be important,
right? And I think with that too, a manager perhaps with too many direct reports or too many meetings combined with that may not always be able to put out the communication that's needed there, which leads to that demotivation that you're seeing or that was mentioned.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it could also be tough. I mean, because let's just say, for example, let's say, you have 10 reports, which is probably, pushing it. But, some teams are that large and they have conversations with 2 or 3 people because they get along with them or whatever. They've communicated some idea to them. And then the team kind of disseminates that. Is not the same as me, the manager, communicating with all 10, however that might be. But
quote that I heard many years ago when I was I think it was in a management training class, quote said that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers.
I've heard that.
And I think it's so true because oftentimes you might love your job or hate your manager and you don't want to be there. Or you might hate your job, but you love your manager, so you're willing to put up with a job you hate because of that.
Right, because I know that they'll go to bat for you or, whatever.
Yeah, and I think that can make all the difference in the world. And I think that, it's just one of those that I think about is, people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. And just from the employee perspective or the manager perspective, keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think that, an interesting idea here is what makes a good manager is that relationship, right? And then, of course, it takes 2 to tango on that. So, you are going to have to put in some work into the relationship, right? It can't just be one-sided.
Yep.
But then the same, obviously, is for the manager. And so, don't be afraid to give that input. Talk about culture, right? Things that have worked for you in the past, if that's, open and they're willing to receive that. But at the same time, you have to recognize that, that they have a lot on their plate as well.
Yep.
So,
but you also have to build that trust as the manager, or between the manager and the employee, to the point that you can be open. You can say, yeah, boss, I've got a problem with this, and know that it's not going to get turned around and twisted on you for not getting your job done, or or whatever it may be. And I've seen some managers that when you bring up something like that, they do everything they can to try and help you, whatever, the bridge of technical or soft skills or personnel or whatever. But I've seen others that you say, oh, well, I'm having a problem with this. So they write it down as goals, must fix this problem. And then you're expected to, okay, if you don't fix that problem, you're in trouble. And that just sort of burns the bridge of trust there, I think.
Right. Yeah. So that idea takes me back to episode 110, talking with Richard Campbell, right? About building trust with my team. And it does take time, and you have to make some investments there.
Yep. I can remember a manager, just a short story on that, who really burned the trust bridge quickly. And this was probably 15 years ago. We had a web conference or a GoToMeeting type call going on. And we get into the call and we get talking about, okay, who's here? And I was in the role of a team manager at that point, and then the VP type. So we did the whole call about, okay, who's here? And I was in the role of a team manager at that point, and then the VP type manager was above me at that point. And I had a team of 4 or 5 people on the call. And I was on the call. The team was on the call. The VP was supposed to be on the call, or my boss, but he wasn't there.
Oh.
So we did the whole call because we figured, okay, he's not there. We're going to proceed without him. And we get to the end of the call. And as soon as the call ends, he phones me directly and just reams me out for how I behaved on the call. Whatever. I don't even know, for how I worked with the team on the call.
So he was listening in, but did not state that he was there.
Yes. And there were several times that during the call, it came up with things that he should have chimed in with had he been honest about being there. But instead, he was just there to sort of entrap people, to get people. So rather than jumping in and saying, well, what about this? Or what about that? He just things that he didn't like that I did on the call.
Obviously, we would probably not include that in the list of a good manager.
Yep. And that was interesting because I quit that manager. And in fact, when the company I was working for, I resigned. And when I resigned, I said, I'm happy to work here, but I will not work for this person anymore. And they reassigned me to a different place.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up working there for a couple more years, and I enjoyed it.
Interesting. Yeah.
But you've got to be able to sort of be understanding, but also to realize when the person you're working with cannot be trusted.
Yeah, cannot be there. And that's a topic that we, I guess again we could kind of get into, later, is that, your manager's not your only option, right? Obviously you need to build trust, but going to an HR, if your organization is large enough to have one, and most people at least have someone responsible for payroll, if nothing else, shoulder to cry on. But, having some of those avenues to talk about, I think one thing that can be damaging to culture and to that trust is to start talking about your managers kind of behind their back, right? To that water cooler talk, because you never know if that's going to get back to them. And that it can be severely damaging. You may not like it. Voice it to the manager, right? But don't voice it to everybody else and tell them, how crappy they are. Because, won't do you any favors.
Yeah, there's an old expression. It's called complain up.
Oh, there you go.
Where if you've got something to complain or gripe about, you should bring that to your manager.
Right.
Not take it to your peers or coworkers.
Right. And I remember now, so this was for a startup, and they were going through some growing pains. And I think they were, I guess I can't remember exactly how many people, but I want to say they've forgotten about it. Or I guess I can't remember exactly how many people, but I want to say they were about 40 people. at that point, but they were growing, and we were moving to a new office space, things like that. And I remember one of the things they'd always keep asking for was, for patience, right? You give us a suggestion, you give us feedback. Just because we don't turn around on it in 10 days doesn't mean that we've forgotten about it. And, and that's going to be one of those things too. I mean, very similar to that, again, going back to that dashboard, alert, you want to give that feedback again. If you let some time pass, if enough time has passed and you feel like you haven't gotten a response, don't feel free to try that again and say, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Or, get a status update, right? Get that pulse and let your managers know that you're still thinking about it, right?
Yep.
So, well, interesting. Well, thanks everybody for chiming in and kind of giving some of your thoughts. We be back on this kind of collaborative episodes, and this one was another good example.
Yeah, definitely. I guess, how do we call it? The non-technical, sort of the more soft skill side of things, topics have been interesting lately. I think we've done a few of those over the last several months, and it's just a different take on things, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's very good. As always, you can give us your thoughts and feedback on social media. You can hit me up via email, carlos.chacon@sequeldatapartners.com, or you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. I am at Carlos L. Chacon.
And I'm on LinkedIn as Steve Sedman, and we'll see you on the SQL Trail.